Hey everyone, this is Preheat. Welcome back to another World of Warcraft video. Today we're going to be talking about Frost Mage in patch 10.1.5. So I've been talking about Fire Mage a little bit, and I'm definitely very excited for Fire Mage in patch. This is the long-awaited Mage Rework that I know a lot of y'all have been waiting for, myself included. But I gotta say, I think Frost Mage might actually be my favorite of the three Mage specs that I've tried out so far, and I'll tell you why. So number one is that there's so much variety in how you deal damage, right? So Frost obviously has been very simple for a long time. You kind of just throw out your Ice Lances, use your flurries. There's not really much to it. But in the patch, we're getting a lot of really awesome new talents that make it so that we might actually play a lot of these builds that we maybe have gone in the past, but have kind of just fallen off, right? So stuff like Glacial Spike, Comet Storm, and even Ray of Frost are making a huge return. Also, we have some new awesome AoE talents like Coldest Snap. So basically, it makes it so that your Winter's Chill is applied in AoE, so you're just going to shatter on everything that you Cone of Cold. And your Cone of Cold resets the cooldown on your Frozen Orb, Blizzard, and Comet Storms. Basically, you can roll up to a pack, you can throw out your Frozen Orb, immediately Blizzard, and then Comet Storm, use your Pet Freeze while that's happening. Cone of Cold, it's going to reset the cooldown on all of those spells, and then you can immediately Comet Storm again into Frozen Orb, into Blizzard, and then believe it or not, you can actually Cold Snap to reset the cooldown on your Cone of Cold so that you can do it a third time. And the amount of AoE burst this does, I mean, you can just see for yourself in the background. It's kind of nuts. I'm not really a huge fan of having your defensive be tied to this with Cold Snap. I think that's something that they should probably change. But you gotta say, like, this is amazing burst, right? It's a 5-minute cooldown, obviously, and it's basically impossible to avoid getting an Augmentation Evoker buff because there's just so many Augmentation Evokers on the PTR. But yeah, I think the damage kind of speaks for itself. Also, I should mention, so obviously Rune of Power is gone. We already talked about that, but Frost is now a 2-minute class, and they actually made Icy Veins good. Like, Icy Veins is a 2-minute cooldown. It now gives us a little water elemental pet, right? And that pet is really awesome because they can apply freeze, they can make the targets take more damage, and whenever they use their Water Jet ability, which is on a pretty short cooldown now, it's going to give us a flurry every single time. So I have to say that, like, the single target and AoE for Frost feel just very, very good. Also, I haven't mentioned this yet, but Icy Propulsion is gone. Yeah, they actually removed that talent, which is amazing. That talent was just so frustrating to deal with as a Frost Mage. And of course, I already mentioned this, but Icy Veins is now 2 minutes, right? So this is kind of like a compensation, I guess you could think of it that way. And it makes Frost like a proper 2-minute spec. You now use your Icy Veins around every 2 minutes. It's not exactly right because you also have Shifting Power, which obviously gives you a little cooldown reduction. But it's mostly like a 2-minute class, and having a Ray of Frost basically for every single one of those, every other, you get a super juiced up Ray without even having to build it up. And then of course on the 1 minute mark, you have to have some Fingers of Frost to be able to get it to that 80% increased damage. But yeah, I mean, it's just a lot of fun talents that we didn't really have access to for so long are back, and that's probably what I'm most excited for when it comes to Frost. All right, so I want to briefly show off the talents that I'm running, and this is my single target setup, and I'm not going to talk about the class tree too long because we've already discussed this, but I just want to briefly highlight. So Ice Cold makes your Ice Block into a instant cast off the GCD ability, right? Obviously you can't cast it while casting, but you can press it, it's instant cast, so you can just immediately cast your spell afterwards. And with Cryo Freeze, it's actually going to heal you for 80% of your health while you have a 70% damage reduction. It's going to make it so you can move around. Of course, this isn't going to give you immunity, so you will still have a debuff if you're trying to use Ice Block as a way to, like, basically negate a mechanic. It's not going to work for that, but it is going to help a lot with surviving. And I mean, you're just going to be pretty much immortal, not fully, but pretty much with this thing. And of course, with Winter's Protection, if you get 2 points in this thing, you can bring Ice Block down to a 3-minute cooldown. And Frost also has Cold Snap, so you can just use Cold Snap too to reset the cool on your Ice Block. It's really, really nice for that. And then I'm also running the new Mass Barrier talent. So this thing, whenever you press it, it just gives your allies a barrier. You can see it here, right? And if I was Arcane, for instance, this would also reduce the magic damage taken that they have. But for me as Frost, it's going to make it so melee attackers are slowed. But this thing is going to be pretty strong in Mythic Plus as a 2-minute cooldown. I imagine you could use this to cheese a lot of mechanics on bosses. It'd be really, really useful for Tyrannical Week too. And then over on the Frost tree, a lot is reorganized here. I'm going to talk about the important stuff. So number one is they've just removed Icy Propulsion. I already talked about that, but that talent's just gone. We don't have to worry about it anymore. It can't hurt us. Now we have Ray of Frost 2.0. So this thing makes it so that whenever we use our Fingers of Frost, we get an 8% damage buff on our Ray of Frost, and that stacks 10 times, right? So it makes it 80% stronger. And whenever you use Icy Veins, you instantly get the full stack. So on the opener, basically, as long as you activate your Icy Veins, you're going to be able to Ray of Frost. It's going to do a huge amount of damage. Keep in mind, you can apply Winter's Chill with Flurry, right before you use your Ray of Frost, and that's going to make it act as if every single tick of Ray of Frost is shattering. And on top of that, we have this new talent here, Glacial Assault. Well, it's not really new, but basically this is the tier bonus from Sepulcher of the first ones, right? It makes it so that whenever you use Comet Storm, it increases the damage your target takes. I actually like this talent a lot because it makes it feel like Comet Storm is like actually something I want to play around, right? I want to basically set up a Shatter combo with my Flurry into Comet Storm and then, use my damage in that window. And the only thing obviously that I don't like about this talent is the fact that Comet Storm can be dodged if the tank is moving the boss too quickly, right? That's still kind of annoying. But at least with this thing, you don't have to actually put the 2 points in to get the damage taken increase. That's just going to affect the proc. And of course, Glacial Spike. So how could we forget such an awesome talent? And it has felt bad for so long, but now Glacial Spike is just, it's huge, right? This thing makes it so that we get our Icy Veins extensions with TV, right? It gives us more of a TV increase than like anything else, right? So if you look here, it says Glacial Spike extends it an additional 1.5 seconds. So it's going to be 2 seconds for every Glacial Spike, right? And then obviously Glacial Spike's damage itself is really good. They've buffed this ability quite a bit. You want to Flurry into your Glacial Spike or have Winter's Chill already applied. You're going to Shatter with that thing. I love the Shatter gameplay of Frost. I love feeling like I'm thinking about which spells I'm shattering, right? So I think a typical opener is going to look something kind of like this. You probably do a Frostbolt into a Flurry, and then you activate your Icy Veins. Now that Winter's Chill is applied, we're going to want to apply Comet Storm too. Probably get any sort of damage bonus we can, and then probably want to use our Ray of Frost because it's going to be fully juiced up from using Icy Veins, right? So that's that 80% increase on it. Just blast the target with a huge Ray of Frost. Because our Ice Lances give us Icicles, we want to just very quickly get our Glacial Spike ready. And of course, whenever you have a Glacial Spike, you want to cast that into a Flurry so that it shatters. But you can't be too close to the target unless you already have Winter's Chill applied. And then aside from that, I think you're pretty much just trying to keep your Icy Veins up as long as you can, kind of like how it plays on live, right? Try to always have a Flurry for every Glacial Spike. Yeah, I could see you maybe using the Flurry early if you have very low Icicles. And then, of course, try to shatter every single Glacial Spike. And then the name of the game is just try to get to 10 stacks for your next Ray of Frost before the cooldown is up, right? And we want to use our Shifting Power if we fall out of TV to immediately get our cooldowns back up, because Frost actually feels like it has cooldowns now. Like, we actually want to make these cooldowns come up faster because there's just so many of them we want to stay on top of. So there is one talent that I'm not 100% on, and I put it into Freezing Winds for the time being because I want to make sure I get those Fingers of Frost so that I can rev up my Ray of Frost, right? But I'm not completely convinced on this. I end up wasting a lot of these Fingers of Frost, but it does help a lot having Frozen Orb generate them because it means that I'm pretty safe, right? Every time, whenever the minute comes up, I'm pretty safe to be able to use that Ray of Frost as soon as it comes off cooldown. Obviously, using Flurry into Comet Storm and then immediately ripping that Ray so that we get that Winter's Chill bonus on the Comet Storm and the Ray of Frost without using any of those stacks. And it feels so good to play. The thing that I don't like about this build though, I gotta nitpick a little bit. So this talent right here, Splintering Cold, makes it so that we generate 2 Icicles randomly. This is basically like the Ice 9 talent from BFA. And when it works early, it feels good, right? Like just getting 2 Icicles randomly feels pretty good whenever you have 1 or 2 Icicles. But if you have 3 Icicles and you get 2, it feels really bad because you're already casting another Frostbolt. And then you see you have 5 Icicles and you basically wasted 20% of the Icicles, right? So you have a choice. You can either instantly interrupt your Frostbolt and then start casting your Glacial Spike. And then it depends on how quickly you react to it, right? This was actually a damage increase in BFA to like stop your cast and immediately start casting your Glacial Spike, or you can finish your Frostbolt and then do your Glacial Spike. Either way, it feels awkward to me. Not really a big fan of this talent. But yeah, I mean, that's really all I have in terms of like problems with the spec. Like, I feel like Frost in single target is just super fun to play with this setup here, and I'm really enjoying it. But I want to also talk about my Mythic Plus builds. So this is what we're kind of running right now. I'll talk about the critical talents. So number 1, very important, make sure you don't skip this thing, Time Manipulation. So if you have Freezing Cold, it makes Cone of Cold apply as a quote-unquote loss of control, right? It's going to fall under this category. So every single time we use Ice Lance, that's 2 seconds off of our Cone of Cold. Of course, the premier talent in this thing, the biggest part, is Cold Snap. We already talked about this one. I already told you how it works, but it is just amazing. This talent is just so fun, right? And with a 45-second cooldown and reducing it with time manipulation, you're going to basically have this thing up every single pull. And it actually feels good in single target too. Like this is actually a talent that whenever you're fighting like a boss in Mythic Plus, it actually feels like you want to be in melee. You want to be hitting that thing with the Cone of Cold. Not a huge fan of having to play melee as a range, but I will say the trade-off of like having that Winter's Chill applied by your Cone of Cold and being able to instantly reset the cooldown on your Comet Storm, which is giving you a damage increase, and your Frozen Orb, right? Like those feel really, really awesome. And if there's ever any burst AoE that's happening, right, you as a Frost Mage, you're just like, oh, that's me. That's my job, right? And it hasn't been that way for so long, right? Like Frost hasn't been like a burst AoE spec since basically Mists of Pandaria. That was like the last time I remember like really enjoying Frost Mage as like a burst AoE spec doing challenge modes. And this talent like has made me realize just how much fun Frost can be in AoE whenever you have that burst damage on demand. So I'm just like such a fan of this talent. I think it was so well designed. Biggest thing, right? And I already talked about this, but we have to make sure that we look at how Cold Snap is interacting, right? Cold Snap interacting with Cone of Cold, it's fun. It's good for the memes. It's good for the content, right? 5-minute cooldown makes your burst go crazy. But realistically speaking, having your damage cooldown tied to your defensive cooldown, especially something this powerful, it feels a little bad, right? Not really a huge fan of that. I do think that having my Cold Snap be for defensive uses only would probably be for the best. So how are you feeling about Frost Mage in 10.1.5? Let me know in the comments below. And if you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. And if you want to see more of my content, be sure to subscribe to the channel, ring that notification bell, and hopefully I see you in the next one.